The moment I stepped into that open house, my palms were already sweating. Not because of the property. It was a mediocre mid-century knockoff in a pretentious zip code, but because the name on the welcome sign punched me right in the gut. Vanessa L. Carter, luxury real estate specialist. Yeah, that Vanessa. My ex-wife. The same woman who once cried about not wanting to work a day in her life. Now suddenly flipping houses in designer heels. That should have been my first red flag when we met. Heels in the kitchen and zero interest in responsibilities. But I stayed. Like a fool. I guess I showed up today for closure. Maybe I wanted to see if she regretted it. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself I was over her. But then he showed up. Tall. Tan. Wearing that smug, "I'm sleeping with your wife" grin. The new husband, Troy, looked like a steroid-inflated Ken doll that fell face first into a vat of self-tanner. As I walked through the marble fake foyer, pretending to care about crown molding, he stepped beside me, leaned in, and chuckled. "You must be the cleaner here." "Poor you." I froze. My stomach twisted, my jaw clenched, and I felt my knuckles crack on their own. He smirked, like he'd just spit in my drink and dared me to take a sip. Vanessa was across the room, laughing with some buyers, tossing her highlighted hair like she hadn't just married this walking insult. She looked right at me and winked. A wink. My heart pounded like a war drum. I couldn't let this slide. So I smiled, pulled my phone from my pocket, and said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Then our $40 billion deal is off now." The room went dead quiet. Vanessa's eyes widened, her fake laugh choking into a cough. Troy's grin melted off his face like butter in a frying pan. "You what?" he stammered. I slipped my phone back into my coat. "Oh, nothing. Just the international acquisition you were supposed to pitch next week. Guess you'll be using your cleaner for that now." See, what Vanessa never knew, and what Troy clearly hadn't bothered to Google, was that I didn't just own a tech company. I built an empire. And Troy? He worked in consulting. For one of our subsidiaries. Vanessa rushed over, grabbing his arm. "Babe, he's bluffing. He's broke. Don't listen to him." I turned, already walking out the door, but not before dropping the last bomb. "Then tell your husband why the yacht in Monaco is registered under my name. The one you spent a weekend on last summer. With me." Gasps. Whispering. And then yelling behind me as I stepped out into the sun, breathing for the first time in what felt like years. That was just 3 weeks ago. And that's how it all came full circle. But the story? Oh, the story starts way before that twisted open house. It started with a lie. With lipstick on my shirt that wasn't my wife's shade. With perfume that didn't belong in my car. With the nights she worked late, but came home smelling like cigar smoke and cheap whiskey. With the moment I looked into her phone when she left it on the kitchen island. And saw a message. From Troy. "Last night was insane. You're a damn goddess. He'll never know." I remember that exact second. My vision blurred. I don't even remember breathing. Just the silence in the house. The sound of the dishwasher running. The sound of my world cracking in half. But instead of confronting her right away, I did what any man with pride does. I gathered every piece of evidence. Screenshots. Locations. Receipts. Waited. Plotted. Because when a woman like Vanessa betrays you, you don't scream. You plan. And when the time is right, you burn everything she built. This is the story of how I burned her life down. Piece by piece. With a smile. She came home that night humming like nothing happened. She always did that. Like guilt was something she outsourced to someone else. She set her purse down, kissed me on the cheek, and poured herself a glass of wine. "Rough day," she said. "Clients are insane this week." I looked at her. Blonde curls perfectly placed, lips glossed just enough to be noticeable. She wore the same blazer she did the night before. Only now, I could see it. A wrinkle near the collar, lipstick barely visible on the inside fold. Different shade. Bright red. Vanessa never wore red. "Clients, huh?" I said, keeping my voice flat. She didn't even look up from her phone. "Yeah, all over the place. This one guy tried to lowball me today. Said his budget was 10 mil, then backed out." I watched her fingers dance across the screen. Probably texting him. The guy who told her she was a goddess. "Did you sell the penthouse?" I asked. "Not yet." She was too fast with that answer. "Why?" I shrugged, just wondering where the lipstick came from. She froze. Barely. If I hadn't been staring, I'd have missed it. Her thumb hovered mid-type, and her eyes flicked up for half a second before returning to her screen. "What lipstick?" I leaned in. "The one on your blazer." She scoffed. Oh, that. Probably from Rachel. We hugged. She wears that fire truck color. I hate it. Rachel. Her business partner. Gay. Bald. No lipstick. Not even chapstick. I didn't say anything. I just nodded, finished my drink, and got up. That night, I didn't sleep. She curled up next to me like she always did, back pressed against my chest, breathing soft and slow. I stared at the ceiling, thinking how strange it was to lie next to someone who could lie so easily. I waited a week. Collected more. A hotel bill under her name. A booking for a spa resort 2 towns over, listed under Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. That wasn't our last name. Photos. One of them holding hands in a parking lot. One of him kissing her neck outside a sushi bar. The same place she told me she hated because it reminded her of her ex. I almost laughed, but I didn't confront her. Not yet. I wanted her to be comfortable. I wanted her to get used to the lying, to think she was invincible. And then, one night, I told her I was going to Chicago for work. I even packed a bag and had my assistant call the house pretending to confirm the trip. Vanessa hugged me, told me to be safe, and was texting someone the second she thought I left. But I didn't leave. I parked 3 blocks away. Waited. By 9:43 p.m., a black Mercedes pulled into the driveway. Troy. I watched from across the street as she answered the door in a silk robe I bought her for our anniversary. She kissed him, slid her arms around his neck, pulled him inside like this was normal, like she hadn't just waved goodbye to her husband an hour ago. My chest burned, but I kept my grip tight on the steering wheel. I had to see it through. 47 minutes later, the upstairs light turned off. That was it. I didn't sleep that night either. Just stared at the dark ceiling of my car, listening to my own breath, and trying to keep my hands from shaking. The next morning, I came home. She was in the kitchen, hair tied back, sipping coffee like she hadn't just had a stranger in our bed. She smiled when she saw me. "You're back early." "Trip got canceled," I said. "Surprise inspection." She kissed me. Same lips that kissed him. I wanted to vomit. But instead, I smiled. That was the beginning of the end for her. The next few days, I started preparing. Quietly. Legally. Strategically. Froze her access to the joint account. Had the house evaluated and started shifting assets. I didn't want revenge. I wanted devastation. I wanted her to stand in the ashes of her own lies and realize she lost everything for a few cheap thrills. And I hadn't even begun yet. I hired a private investigator. Not because I needed more proof. Hell, I already had enough to bury her in court. But because I wanted everything. Every little disgusting detail. I wanted to know where they met, how often, what lies she told to cover her trail. And I wanted photos. A timeline. Something undeniable. It took him 4 days. Turns out, they'd been seeing each other for nearly 6 months. 6. Half a year of sneaking, pretending, grinning in my face while slipping into another man's arms behind my back. She'd met him at an open house she was showing. He was a potential buyer who never bought, but clearly invested in other ways. A former gym owner with a fake motivational podcast and a leased car he pretended was bought in cash. A walking cliché of midlife crisis masculinity. And Vanessa? She fell for it like it was a Disney script. I even found recordings of her voice notes to him. Sickeningly sweet, full of lies about me. He's just boring. He works too much. He doesn't even touch me anymore. Touch her? I built a damn empire while she slept till noon. I planned trips she always canceled. I lit candles on our anniversary while she claimed to be too tired from work. And now, suddenly, I'm the villain? The night I got the final folder from the PI, I stayed in my home office until dawn. Went through every file. Every blurry image of them hand in hand. Every receipt. Every line of deception. She didn't even try to hide it well. That's what pissed me off the most. Like she thought I was too dumb, or too in love, to see through it. The next evening, I invited her to dinner. Her favorite steakhouse. The one she bragged about to her friends, pretending it was her who introduced me to it. She dressed like she was on her way to seduce a senator. Red dress. Gold earrings. Even her smile looked fake. "You're in a good mood," she said, sipping wine. "I just feel like celebrating," I replied. "Oh, what's the occasion?" "Freedom," I said. She laughed, not getting it. "Well, cheers to that." Midway through the meal, I pulled out a black envelope and slid it across the table. She picked it up with curiosity, then furrowed her brows when she saw the first photo. Her and Troy, tangled on a hotel balcony, clear as daylight. Then another one. Her in lingerie, straddling him on a couch that wasn't ours. And another, her on the phone, grinning, a hand on his thigh. She dropped the envelope like it burned her fingers. "What the F? What is this?" she stammered. I took another bite of my steak. "You tell me." Her face changed. She wasn't even ashamed, just annoyed that she got caught. "You followed me?" "No, you're not that interesting. I paid someone else to." She looked around, suddenly aware that the restaurant was full of people, that she was exposed, vulnerable, cornered. "I can explain," she said, voice low. "Please do," I said, leaning back. "Tell me how falling on another man's lap counts as real estate networking." She clenched her jaw. "You've been distant. Cold. You pushed me away. And you jumped on the first idiot with abs and a car note." I snapped. "Don't make this about me, Vanessa. You played me. Lied to me. You don't get to cry now." Her eyes flicked toward the waiter. "Can we not do this here?" "Oh, now you care about appearances?" I leaned forward. "You had Troy in my bed, under my roof. Do you think I care who hears now?" She stayed silent, face pale, but still trying to look strong. That was her thing. Never apologize, just deflect. Lie. Twist. I threw my napkin on the table and stood. "I'll be gone in the morning. Papers will be on the counter. The house is mine. The accounts are frozen. You're on your own, Vanessa. You can't do that." I already did. And I walked out. That was the last dinner we ever shared. The last time I looked at her and saw anything human. After that, it was just paperwork and silence. Until the open house. Until Troy opened his stupid mouth. Until that moment when the past caught up to them both. And I smiled. Because the game wasn't over. It was just getting interesting. 2 days after the open house fiasco, Vanessa showed up at my office unannounced. Security called, asking if they should let her up. I almost said no. Almost. But then I thought, let her see what real power looks like. She walked into the glass conference room like she still owned part of my soul, wearing that smug expression that used to fool me. Not anymore. Her confidence looked cheap now, like a knockoff purse. She stood across from me, arms crossed, face calm, but I could see the panic swimming behind her eyes. "Troy got fired," she said. I didn't even flinch. "I know." Her lips tightened. "You didn't have to do that." I looked her dead in the eyes. "You didn't have to cheat on your husband in the house he built." She leaned forward. "You just embarrassed us in front of the entire industry." "No, he embarrassed you. I just returned the favor." Silence stretched between us. For a moment, I thought maybe, she'd finally show some sliver of regret. But no, Vanessa wasn't wired that way. Her pride came first, always. She blinked slowly, then said, "You're still angry." I laughed. "You think this is anger?" "No, that was 6 months ago, when I found out about you and your toy soldier. This is control. You underestimated me, Vanessa." Again, she stepped back, her mask cracking. "You think this makes you better than me? I don't need to think. I am." She didn't reply, just turned around and walked out, heels clicking like gunshots across the marble floor. I watched her go, then buzzed for my assistant. "Give me a list of every property she's trying to sell," I said. "Yes, sir." "Want me to make calls?" "Not yet. Just the list. We'll start with her biggest commission and go from there." See, I could have walked away quietly. Could have let her fade into mediocrity. But she wanted war when she stepped into my house with another man's cologne on her skin. She wanted to destroy me. She forgot who I was. And I never lose. By the end of the week, her top buyer pulled out. Anonymous tip about a conflict of interest. 2 days later, her second biggest deal fell apart over a surprise audit. Vanessa called me, voice shaking. "You're ruining my business." I responded calmly, "No, I'm returning the favor." She hung up. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about balance. Justice. I gave her years of my life. My loyalty. My silence. Even when I started to suspect the truth. And she paid me back with lies and betrayal. Troy, for his part, disappeared off social media. No more shirtless photos. No more motivational crap. Word got around he was looking for work. Any work. Apparently, gyms don't like hiring guys who get fired by billionaires. Poetic. One evening, I drove past the house. My old house. Lights off. Overgrown grass. A "for sale" sign crooked on the lawn. It didn't even have her name on it anymore. She must have been dropped from the listing. I parked down the street. Just sat there in the dark, watching the place where I once dreamed we'd raise a family. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. Just emptiness. And beneath that, something close to peace. She ruined what we had. But I didn't ruin myself chasing her. I rebuilt. Quietly. Without fanfare. I didn't need to post about it or prove anything. I just worked. Focused. Let the storm inside me settle. But the damage? It never truly leaves you. Even now, sometimes I wake up and reach for a body that's not there. Hear a laugh in a crowd that sounds like hers. Smell that perfume in an elevator and feel my chest tighten. She took something from me. Something I'll never get back. But she also gave me something. Clarity. And I plan to use it every day for the rest of my life. 2 weeks after the last time we spoke, she emailed me. Subject line. Please. That was all it said. Just please. No greeting. No explanation. No pride left. I stared at it for a solid 10 minutes, debating whether I should open it. Curiosity won. Inside was a wall of text, a desperate blend of apologies, excuses, and thinly veiled manipulations. She claimed she was confused, said Troy wasn't who she thought he was, told me how she missed what we had, and begged me to meet her just one more time. She didn't want closure. She wanted a lifeline, and she knew I had plenty to throw, but I wasn't tossing one toward a sinking ship full of lies. I didn't reply, but I saved the email. For the file. That same night, I got a text from a mutual friend. A photo attached. Vanessa at a bar. Alone. Mascara smudged, drink in hand, staring off like the world betrayed her. The caption read, "She's been like this every night. Guess karma doesn't wear heels." It should have made me feel satisfied, but it didn't. I didn't want her broken. I wanted her changed. But that wasn't possible. Some people rot from the inside out, and no amount of heartbreak molds them into better versions of themselves. I learned that the hard way. A few days later, I had a meeting with a foreign investor, someone important, someone connected. We shook hands, shared drinks, and right before closing the deal, he asked, "By the way, is it true your ex-wife is the one who dated that guy who insulted you during a deal?" I smiled. "Yeah, that's the one." He shook his head. "Man, she must regret that. Everyone's heard the story. Legend stuff." I just raised my glass. Said nothing. My silence said everything. That night, I got a call from my mother. She'd heard through the grapevine that Vanessa was back living with her sister. Cramped apartment. No clients. Troy had taken off. Left town with some 20-year-old and a mountain of credit card debt. Vanessa was drowning in bills and bad decisions. "Are you okay?" my mom asked. "I'm more than okay," I said. And I meant it. Because here's the thing people don't talk about after betrayal. You don't just survive it. You evolve from it. You become someone who's not as trusting, sure. But you also become someone who can spot a lie from across a room. Someone who knows the price of silence. Someone who's dangerous, because you've already seen hell and walked out cleaner. I wasn't angry anymore. The war was over. I had won. Not because she lost everything, but because she never got to keep me. The last time I saw her was accidental. At a coffee shop near the marina. I was waiting for a client. She was probably trying to use the Wi-Fi for free. She looked tired. Hair thrown into a messy bun. Clothes too big for her frame. She noticed me, but didn't smile. Didn't wave. Just stared for a second and looked away. I didn't move. Didn't speak. Let her sit in the silence she created. And when I got up to leave, I walked past her without a word. She didn't follow. Didn't call out. Because deep down, she knew the truth. There's no coming back from certain choices. And some doors, once closed, stay locked forever. A month passed. The house finally sold, at a loss. She didn't get a penny. I made sure of that. Between the divorce settlement I orchestrated and the quiet legal maneuvers I made before filing, she was cut out of everything she didn't earn. She tried to fight it at first, but when her own texts and hotel bills were introduced in mediation, her lawyer practically whispered, "Take the deal before he buries you." She did. But that didn't stop her from trying to crawl back, piece by piece. She started messaging old friends, mutuals, slipping into conversations where my name would come up, trying to rewrite the past, to make herself the victim of a cold, workaholic husband. She wanted sympathy, maybe even a second chance. What she got instead was silence. People don't trust a woman who lies that easily. And once the mask slips, it's hard to wear it again without everyone seeing the cracks. She texted me once more. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me." I didn't realize it until it was too late. I read it once and deleted it. No reply. I wasn't interested in her regrets. I wasn't interested in her pain. That belonged to her now. A fitting inheritance for the life she chose. But you want to know the truth? There were moments, brief ones, in between deals and meetings, usually at night, where my mind would flicker back to the early days. The good ones. Her laughing in the passenger seat on our first road trip. Her standing barefoot in our first apartment, painting the wall the wrong shade of green and pretending she liked it. Her falling asleep on my chest while the credits rolled. Those moments haunt you longer than the betrayals. Because they were real. At least for you. But eventually, even those fade. Especially when you meet someone new. I wasn't looking. I wasn't ready. But life rarely asks you. Her name was Rachel. Not the fake business partner from Vanessa's lies. This was someone real. Sharp, funny, honest to a fault. The kind of woman who doesn't pretend to be impressed by money, who doesn't wear masks to dinner. We met at a charity event I almost didn't attend. She caught me staring at my untouched whiskey and asked, "Trying to drown something, or just bored?" I smiled. "Maybe both." She laughed. "Well, I'm more interesting than your drink. Let's test that theory." We talked for hours. Not once did she ask what I did for a living. That's how I knew she wasn't like Vanessa. It took time. I didn't dive in. Didn't rush. But slowly, she started peeling back the layers I didn't even realize I'd wrapped around myself. With her, I didn't feel like a wounded man rebuilding his life. I felt whole. Vanessa? She faded like background noise. I heard she tried to restart her career. No one trusted her. Burned too many bridges. Word got out about the affair, the failed deals, the way she carried herself like she was above everyone until the whole tower crumbled. Her name no longer opened doors. It closed them. And as for Troy, last I heard, he was managing a vape shop in Tampa, posting filtered gym selfies with motivational quotes that sounded like ChatGPT had a seizure. He never knew who he messed with. Neither of them did. But I did. And I remember. Not out of bitterness. Not out of hate. I remember, so I never forget the lesson. Never let a smile blind you to the blade behind it. Never mistake love for loyalty. And never, ever ignore your gut. The truth always finds its way out. And when it does, make sure you're the one standing on solid ground. Not them. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring out. Then another call. And another. Eventually, curiosity pushed me to pick up. "Hello. Is this Ethan Carter?" The voice was shaky. "A woman. Not Vanessa." "Yes. Who's this?" "It's Diane. Vanessa's sister." My pulse slowed. I leaned back in my chair. "Did something happen?" "She's in the hospital." I waited. "She overdosed," Diane said. "It wasn't fatal, but it was close." A long silence. "She asked for you," she added quietly. I felt nothing at first. Not shock. Not worry. Just emptiness. Like someone had mentioned the weather. "Why would she ask for me?" I finally said. Diane sighed. "I think she doesn't know who else to turn to. She's lost everything." I didn't answer. Because I wasn't sure what to say. Diane spoke again, gentler this time. "I'm not calling to guilt you. I just thought you'd want to know." After she hung up, I sat in that silence for almost an hour. And then I drove. Not to the hospital. To the beach. I stood there, hands in my pockets, watching the waves crash against the shore. I thought about everything. The lies, the betrayal, the games, the way she laughed while holding another man's hand. And I thought about the version of her that existed before all of it. The girl I once held and believed in. Maybe that girl died long before the cheating ever started. Maybe this overdose was just the final echo of that version collapsing. But it wasn't my job to rescue her anymore. She didn't drown because she couldn't swim. She jumped headfirst into the storm and cut the rope behind her. I went home. Didn't call back. Didn't visit. I didn't even tell Rachel. There was no point in dragging that shadow into my new life. Speaking of Rachel, she moved in a few weeks later. Not because we rushed it. Because it felt right. Easy. No secrets. No pretending. Just two people who'd seen enough of life to appreciate something real when it finally appeared. One morning, as we drank coffee on the balcony, she asked me, "Do you ever think about her?" I didn't lie. Sometimes. Not who she became. Just who I thought she was. Rachel nodded. "I think that's fair." "I don't miss her," I said. "I know." She leaned into me, warm, steady, real. "You don't have to. It's okay to have ghosts. As long as they stay dead." I smiled. "They are." A year later, I got another message, this time through a mutual friend. Vanessa had left town. No one knew where. She sold what little she had left, changed her number, deleted her socials. Gone, like she never existed. And in some way, maybe she didn't. Maybe she was just a warning. A scar that keeps you from walking back into the fire you escaped from. I still keep one thing, though. That envelope. The photos. The texts. The proof. Not out of spite. Not to relive the pain. But as a reminder of how far I let someone drag me before I opened my eyes. And how far I've come since. Some people look at scars and see weakness. I see armor. Because no matter how much they take from you, you can come back. Sharper. Smarter. Stronger. And when you do, they won't even recognize the man you've become. A year and a half after the whole thing imploded, I found myself at a fundraiser in Manhattan. Suits, champagne, violins in the corner. Exactly the kind of event Vanessa used to dream of being seen at. She used to say she wanted to belong in rooms like that. Now I actually did. Rachel was across the room, talking to a senator's wife, completely at ease. She didn't cling to me, didn't chase attention, didn't try to prove anything. She was simply herself. That's what made her magnetic. And real. I stood near the balcony, sipping scotch, watching the city glow like a living thing. Then I heard a voice behind me. Ethan. I turned. It was Greg, an old college friend of mine. One of the few who'd stayed neutral through the mess. Damn, he said with a laugh, clapping my shoulder. I didn't expect to see you here. We talked for a bit. Business, life, all the usual. Then he hesitated. You ever hear from her? I knew who he meant. No, I said. Not in over a year. He nodded slowly. I ran into her a while back. Small town upstate. She was working at a local realty office. Looked different. Tired. I didn't say anything. She asked about you, he added after a moment. Said she hoped you were happy. That caught me off guard. Not because she asked, but because, for once, she didn't try to reach out herself. No stunt. No drama. Just a quiet secondhand message, floating in through a friend. Maybe that was her version of an apology. Or maybe life finally taught her the lessons I tried to teach gently, before she forced me to teach them painfully. Greg moved on, mingling with other guests. I stayed behind for a moment, staring out at the skyline, thinking about all the pain I had dragged through, all the nights I laid awake, all the moments I doubted my own worth because of her. And now I didn't feel anger, or resentment, or even relief. I felt finished. It was over. The story she tried to write for me had ended, burned out, and I had started writing my own. Rachel joined me a few minutes later, her hand slipping into mine like it belonged there. What were you thinking about? She asked. Old ghosts. Still haunting you. I looked at her. Not anymore. She smiled. Good. Let them go. They don't deserve to follow you here. I kissed her forehead. And in that moment, I realized the most powerful revenge I'd ever achieved wasn't taking Vanessa down. It wasn't ruining her career or exposing her lies. It was healing. It was rebuilding myself into someone untouchable. Someone honest. Strong. At peace. Because while she played games in shallow waters, I built a kingdom on solid ground. And that's something no one can take from me again.